Welcome to another FPL video. We're going to do something slightly different here today. We're going to be providing a double game week guide for game week 22, and this is all the latest information at the time of this recording. There may be another update next week where we get official confirmation of the doubles we're going to get, but right now all we can do is rely on Ben Krellin and other reliable sources to just provide the latest information and plan our transfers. But speaking of transfers, try to hold off and don't make any early ones because there's pretty much close to 2 weeks worth of action in the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. A lot can still happen in terms of COVID-19, injuries and many other factors such as suspensions. So for me, it's very important to just hold off, have a clear plan, and also look at which teams are likely to double, which teams could have a double, and which teams will not be having one. So all of that will be here in this one-stop shop video, and we're going to go through it team by team, talking about the best assets for each one of these clubs, as well as which teams they could face in Game Week 22. Currently, Arsenal only have one game in Game Week 22, and it's a North London derby against Tottenham away, but they could also have one more fixture, and they're one of the teams that are likely to double. So we're going to start off actually listing the teams that could, well, that are very likely, should I say, of having a double game week. Then we're going to move on to those that have a potential double game week, but it's a bit less likely, and then two teams which are definitely not going to have a double game week in 22. So other than Tottenham, which is a confirmed fixture for Arsenal, they could face Wolves at home, Chelsea away, or Liverpool at home. Now that would be not a really great double game week, to be honest, even if it was Wolves at home, which would be the best case scenario for Arsenal. And some of their assets still offer great value. You see the three on screen: Bukayo Saka, Aaron Ramsdale and Kieran Tierney. I still am a big fan of Smith Rowe and Martinelli in this game. The problem is I do maybe anticipate a bit of rotation between the two of those that I just mentioned there, with only 2 games in the space of a few days if the double game week does occur. So that would kind of put me off those two compared to Bukayo Saka, Tierney and Ramsdale, who are probably going to start both games, and that means their ceiling is higher. So from Arsenal, if I were to pick 3, it would be Saka, Ramsdale and Tierney, but just behind them would be Martinelli and possibly an Odegaard or a Smith Rowe. But some of those players could actually be rotated or benched in one of those games. I do expect Smith Rowe to get 1 start out of the next 2. So if you do have him, it makes him a bit tricky to sell because he could do really well even off the bench. But because he's probably not going to play both games, it's very unlikely for Smith Rowe to do that. And the fixtures aren't going to be that great either way. There is an argument to actually selling someone like Smith Rowe, but the likes of Saka, Ramsdale and Tierney are all worthwhile buys. Just bear in mind with any Arsenal players, they're going to be blanking in game weeks 25 and 27. As things stand, and that also puts me off from buying any Arsenal players myself. Next up, we have Brighton. They're another team that are likely to have a double in Game Week 22, so a lot of people are flocking towards Marc Cucurella, the former Barcelona player, and the fixtures that Brighton could have. So they already have Crystal Palace, that's an established fixture, but they could also have either Man United away, Tottenham at home, or Chelsea at home. The fixtures, once again, aren't really particularly great, but it's still a decent double if, for example, they face Crystal Palace and Man United. That wouldn't be too bad for Brighton, but either way, it's not anything groundbreaking or amazing. Now, with Brighton, as you can see on screen, I'm kind of more of a fan of their defensive assets. So Robert Sanchez in goal, probably one of the best pound-for-pound goalkeepers in the game. Cucurella looks like a really good option, around 5 million, and it will be a decision to be made between Cucurella, a Wolves defender, Reguilon, Emerson Royal or Matty Cash, for example, and that's something I'm looking at in order to replace Reece James and Tino Livramento. Then there is Tariq Lamptey. Now, he is a bit injury prone. He might actually be benched for one of these matches. And if you want an attacking player, apart from Maupay, who's looking all right at the moment, I'd probably highlight Trossard. But I'm not a big fan of Brighton's attack. I would mainly look at their defenders. Would I double up? Probably not. So it's just a case of, do you have Sanchez? If you don't, you can get him in as your second goalkeeper, or you could bring Cucurella in. I think they would be my top 2 picks from Brighton. I still like Lamptey and a few other assets, but really it's just their defence. Their attack does leave a lot to be desired at times, but those fixtures aren't great, just like with Arsenal, but there will be some really good doubles potentially for some of these teams. And once again, I have to stress, these aren't officially confirmed. This doesn't mean just because they're likely to have a double game week, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to have it for sure. There is still a chance that they don't end up getting the double and they only have one fixture instead. Next up, we have Burnley, and honestly, I would avoid all of their assets if I'm being completely honest. Now, the fixtures necessarily aren't that bad, to be honest, if they do double. So they would have Leicester at home, they already have that fixture, and then it's either Aston Villa away, Everton at home, Tottenham at home, or Watford at home. Let's say, for example, they end up facing Watford at home on top of that Leicester fixture. That's pretty decent, but Pope is 5.4 million. He's only recovering now from an illness. Is it really worth going for him? Probably not. I think there are many better goalkeepers in the game, just like Sanchez, as we talked about before, Aaron Ramsdale, De Gea, Lloris, and many more. So really with Burnley, there is Lowton or a Taylor. You could maybe go for one of those cheap assets as your fifth defender. That's not too bad, but honestly, I would avoid all Burnley assets. There's Chris Wood if you want a striker. Cornet is going to the African Cup of Nations, bear that in mind. The same goes for any African player really, apart from Ismaila Sarr and Emmanuel Dennis from Watford. Other than that, every single African player pretty much is going to go to the African Cup of Nations, with a few exceptions here and there. But yeah, with Burnley, honestly, I would avoid. There's going to be a few other teams on this list that are avoids as well, and I'll be talking about them very soon. But honestly, there's no point. I'm just going through each team and giving you the best options on paper. But really, in some cases, like with Burnley, I just think it's best to steer clear. Based on what we've seen in Game Week 21 so far, Everton are another team that I'm kind of bordering on, just steering clear of them and just avoid their assets. But Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I think, is still a good choice. Do I prefer Watkins, Antonio, and a few other strikers like Harry Kane and Ronaldo? Yes, I do. But Calvert-Lewin is still a good option. And if you're looking for someone around that price bracket, I'd even say he's a similar level to Jimenez this season. I think Calvert-Lewin would actually have had a really good season so far if he didn't get injured a few times. And he will build that fitness and level back up, but it might take some time. Demarai Gray and Doucouré are also really good choices, and you may argue that Doucouré should actually be at the very top of the Everton list, and he is still a fantastic choice. But there's also Anthony Gordon, who has back-to-back returns, including a 14-point haul with his first set of goals in the Premier League, and he was really good for Everton. He was the kind of shining light in that match. Demarai Gray is still a good option. Don't expect miracles from him, but as a fifth midfielder, he could do really well if you're looking to bench boost, for example. But with Everton, really, I would definitely not be looking to double or triple up, despite the fact that they just had a double in 21 and they might have another one in 22. They're very likely to have another one, but honestly, with Everton, I'm not a huge fan of their assets. I do have Demarai Gray and Calvert-Lewin myself, and I am regretting that, to be honest, right now. Things could change very quickly, and in terms of the fixtures they would have, Norwich away, that's already confirmed. They would also have either Burnley away or Newcastle at home. So the fixtures are quite tempting, and that's why a lot of people might still be happy to hold on to Calvert-Lewin and Demarai Gray. But honestly, I wouldn't be looking to triple up. And the same goes for most teams, to be honest. With the COVID situation that we have right now, with any game possibly being postponed at any given time, I think it's best to have one or two players max from any team. And with Everton, really, you're only really looking at one player. You don't want to be doubling or tripling up, and that's coming from someone who has probably made that mistake himself. We're pretty much halfway in terms of the list of teams that are likely going to have a double, and now we're on to Leeds. Now with Bamford, he should be back fairly soon. He just needs to build up that match fitness, and maybe he's not going to get the minutes you want, and this could be another Dominic Calvert-Lewin situation. A really good striker from last season who's just come back from a long-term injury and once again is going to struggle to really get going. But I think he is one of the standouts from Leeds. There is Rafinha. I think he's the absolute standout. If you are looking for one Leeds player, it probably has to be Rafinha. Then on the right-hand side, you can see Gelhardt. But honestly, it is a struggle with some of these teams to pick 3 players to actually get from them. In the last campaign, Rafinha and Bamford was a fantastic duo. I had both of them myself for a long time, and they did very well for me. I would not be looking to double up on Leeds United. And if you look at their fixtures, they have West Ham away and then either Liverpool away or Aston Villa at home. That would be the second fixture. And it's not really a great set of games, especially if they do end up facing Liverpool, which would be very good if you're targeting Liverpool players and want to exploit those fixtures against Brentford and Leeds. But from a Leeds perspective, you probably would be a bit hesitant to actually get these players in. Even with Rafinha, you might even think of selling him because of those fixtures. But yeah, Gelhardt could be a nice little budget striker, but then this might be a bit counterintuitive to actually recommend Bamford and Gelhardt. Would they both start in the same team? Probably not. But Gelhardt could be that nice little budget striker, and with Bamford, he could be a decent option around 7 to 8 million. But honestly, it's just Rafinha for me from Leeds United right now. I wouldn't be looking at anyone else. And either way, you could argue there are better options elsewhere, and Rafinha isn't really a standout. Getting him in at Game Week 22 might not be the right idea. So with Leeds, it's probably another team to avoid, but Rafinha is Rafinha, and he's still a really good player. We're on to Leicester now, and they are absolutely depleted. Just like with Leeds United, to be fair, both of these teams absolutely decimated by injuries, and then obviously with Leicester, so many players going to the African Cup of Nations like Kelechi Iheanacho. So it's really difficult to actually pick 3 players from Leicester City themselves. You're mainly looking at the midfield. James Maddison is probably the standout right now. Then you have Yuri Tielemans. I think it's quite close between them. I would slightly prefer Maddison because of his streak right now. His form is insane, but Tielemans has been more consistent across the whole campaign and even last season. Then we have Luke Thomas. If you want a budget defender, he is going to be starting pretty much every single game. He could get you 6 to 7 points. He sometimes does get that bonus, and you never know what he could do in a double game week. But Leicester, like I already said, they're absolutely decimated by injuries and the African Cup of Nations. So they just don't have any options across the whole pitch. So that's going to make them even worse, even more exposed at times. And honestly, it's probably not a great idea to double or triple up on Leicester in particular. Then you have Lookman. He could be another really interesting option, or Ayoze Perez, because Leicester pretty much have no strikers available. Vardy's out for a month, up to a month anyway. You have Daka, who's injured, and then you have Iheanacho, who's going to the African Cup of Nations. But one of those two players, Lookman or Perez, could play up front, and that could be a quite interesting option. But other than those five, really, there's definitely no one I would consider from Leicester. I've seen some people in the reaction stream yesterday doubling up on Leicester defence. I would definitely not recommend that. They've got a really poor defence. I know they were really good against Liverpool, but that's just one game, and they did have more players available than they currently do. But honestly, with Leicester, Maddison and Tielemans look pretty intriguing. Thomas is a nice little option on the bench to have potentially, especially if you're looking to bench boost. But other than Maddison or Tielemans, I would definitely not really consider the other options too much. In terms of the fixtures they have Burnley away, and then it would be either Tottenham or Norwich at home. Now, if they do end up getting Norwich at home, that's a really good set of double game week fixtures, and then that makes James Maddison probably a really good buy heading into game week 22. The fixtures after that are a bit mixed, and Leicester are still decimated by a lot of different circumstances, but Maddison would look very intriguing. The same goes for Tielemans. But yeah, once again, I wouldn't really make a huge case to buy any of these players, including those two, because Leicester are a very inconsistent team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they actually struggle against those aforementioned teams. We're on to Spurs now, and once again, as I talked about with Arsenal, they are facing each other, so that should be a very interesting game. Two informed teams and two North London rivals. That should be a fantastic game, to be honest. Now, the fixtures for Spurs are quite mixed now. They've already had their kind of honeymoon period, and they actually took advantage of it with a lot of points since Conte has taken over. Their XGC is actually the best since Conte has taken over per 90 of any team. So Spurs are looking really impressive. Their defenders offer great value, such as Reguilon, Emerson Royal, and even those cheaper ones like Davis or Dyer. But I think Reguilon is the pick of the bunch. He is the highest scoring defender for a reason, and I think he has the most attacking threat and also has the biggest capability of bonus points, despite the fact that in recent games Emerson Royal has accumulated more bonus points than the Spaniard. Then there's the infamous duo of Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. Who do I prefer? The same pretty much answer as it's been all season. Heung-min Son is my preference, but Harry Kane, you could double up on their attack. Would I be looking to triple up? This is one of the few teams where I do think a triple up could be decent, especially in Game Week 22. But at the same time, if you can help it, just go for two of them. That should be more than enough. And in terms of the fixtures they could have, other than Arsenal, which would be a home fixture, they could face Leicester away, Brighton away, or Burnley away. So they are guaranteed, if they do have a double game week, to have one away fixture. And then that home tie against Arsenal is pretty tough, but you never know. And Kane and Son tend to do very well in that game. But that's pretty much it. I think I wouldn't really consider too many other players other than these three. Lucas Moura isn't too bad, but there's just so many options around 6-7 million in midfield that I just wouldn't go and recommend him. And then you look at Emerson Royal, you could maybe consider him or one of those cheaper defenders like Dyer or Davis, but Reguilon for me is the best player. The only problem I would have with Reguilon really is the possible rotation with Ryan Sessegnon. Maybe in one of these matches Sessegnon actually starts, and that would be very frustrating because you want to take advantage of this double game week. So take that with a pinch of salt. Reguilon is my preference, but there is a slight risk of rotation compared to Emerson, who right now, as things stand, is more nailed. But Spurs are looking for another right back according to the Evening Standard. They are looking to upgrade on Emerson, so not just a replacement for Doherty, who looks like he's going to be leaving in January, but also upgrading that right wing back spot, where Spurs could actually do even better than they currently are. And the final team, which are very likely to have a double game week, is Watford. And it's difficult to actually pick three players. I think Dennis and King are pretty much the only players I would definitely consider from Watford, with Dennis being the standout, and he is not going to the African Cup of Nations, which was actually announced on New Year's Day. Now, Ben Foster or Bachmann, who's going to start? That's a bit difficult. Ben Foster was first choice before his injury, but Bachmann put in a very good performance against Spurs. But before that, he left a lot to be desired, and it was quite obvious that Foster would come back in and probably regain his spot. But that performance does put some doubts in my mind, so I'm not entirely sure about that goalkeeper situation. But regardless, I wouldn't go for any of their goalkeepers if I'm being honest. I would just look at Dennis and King, with Dennis being my preference. Would I double up on Watford attack? probably not. I just go for one of them if possible, and Dennis is the best one. Just bear in mind he did come off injured in the first half against Spurs with a little niggle, but he got taken off as a precaution. He should be fine for Game Week 22, but you never know how these injuries can develop, and who knows, will Watford and Nigeria have more of a dispute, with Nigeria forcing a clause that will actually force Dennis to not play any games for Watford. It's happened before in the past with other players and nations and federations, so let's wait and see what happens there. But if that doesn't happen and Dennis is clear to play, for me, he's the best Watford option and a really good choice beyond Game Week 22. In terms of the fixtures that Watford do have already, they have Newcastle away, which is a really good fixture, and they could have one of either Crystal Palace at home, Burnley away, or Wolves away. Now, that Wolves fixture, I would want that to be avoided because Wolves are a pretty good team. But the other two, Crystal Palace at home and Burnley away, look good from an offensive point of view. I never expect clean sheets when it comes to Watford. They haven't kept one all season, but their attack looks very good. It's the one good thing, in my opinion, about their team. When you have Sarr coming back around the 8th of February, you have Joshua King and Emmanuel Dennis. That's a pretty solid front three. And for me, Dennis and King look really good. But other than that, do not consider any of these other Watford assets. We've now moved on to the teams that could have a double game week. It's a possible double game week, but it's not as likely as the first few teams that I mentioned. So Watford was the last of those. We're now on to Aston Villa, who could have a double game week, but that doesn't mean it's a guarantee. And to be fair, the same goes for the ones I mentioned before, but those, of course, are more likely, just to make that completely clear. Now, Aston Villa are facing Man United at home, and then it's between Burnley at home or Leeds away to form that double game week. Now, with Aston Villa, Danny Ings and Ollie Watkins are the best options in my opinion. I think Villa look pretty decent going forward. Defensively, they leave a bit to be desired, even under Steven Gerrard, but for me, Ollie Watkins is the pick of the bunch. He didn't play in Game Week 21 because he returned a late positive COVID test, but he should be fine in time for Game Week 22. But remember, there's pretty much 2 weeks between Game Weeks 21 and 22 for all of these clubs, and the amount of time they have to recover. So those like Foden or Watkins or any others who may have suffered from COVID, they should be fine in time for Game Week 22. And Watkins has been the focal point. He's been the best player for Aston Villa under Steven Gerrard. And Matty Cash is probably the best defender you can go for. There is a target as well. Tyrone Mings should be available as well, and he's been very good for Aston Villa, at least from an FPL perspective. As for Martinez, who was amazing last season, I wouldn't go near him because there's just other options in goal like Sanchez, Ramsdale, De Gea, Lloris, and a few others like Jose Sarr, who's looking really good. So I wouldn't go for Martinez. But in terms of the defence, Matty Cash or Target, who have a bit of attacking threat as well, to couple with some decent fixtures potentially, and also with, well, when I say decent fixtures, I mean for 22. If you look at the fixtures beyond that, they look really good. That's why a lot of people are looking to get cash in, and I can understand that. I'm just a bit concerned about their defence. Aston Villa have only kept, I think, 5 clean sheets this season, which is nowhere near the levels they showed in the last campaign when they ended up keeping 15 to 16 clean sheets, which is remarkable, to be honest. But with Aston Villa, their attack is what you really want to target, and I would just go for one player really, if not two, and that would be Ollie Watkins and Matty Cash. The others I wouldn't consider as much. You can maybe take into account someone like Jacob Ramsey as your 5th midfielder, or Douglas Luiz. You can even go for Danny Ings to go for a differential, but honestly, I think Watkins and Cash are the best options from Aston Villa. Honestly, I want to keep this short and sweet. Brentford have poor fixtures in Game Week 22 and possibly after that as well. And also, their FPL assets have just been really poor and disappointing this season. Janssen, Tony and Mbumo looked like they were okay at one stage of the campaign, but it just hasn't really materialised for them. Now, in terms of the fixtures they could have, they already have Liverpool away, and they could also have Man United at home, which, to be fair, isn't a poor fixture on paper, especially with United's form the whole season, really. But I wouldn't really go for any of these Brentford players. The fixtures after this are pretty poor as well. Tony is probably the pick of the bunch, but I'm not really a big fan of him. And the same goes for Mbumo, who should be back from an injury in Game Week 22. And then you look at Pontus Jansson, who is the pick of the bunch in the defence. But honestly, I would stay clear from Brentford, not go for any of their assets. If you're in a situation where you have Brentford players, you could actually even get rid of them, despite the fact that they could have a double game week and do well against Man United, for example. But honestly, I would stay clear from Brentford and move on to the other teams who will have better fixtures, better FPL assets, and just be better long-term options beyond Game Week 22. As good as Chelsea are, they're another team that I'd probably avoid. I wouldn't be looking to bring in any of their players because they are blanking in 24 and 25 as things stand because of the Club World Cup. So you're really bringing them in for a double potentially in 22, which, once again, they're not a team that are likely to have a double game week, just bear that in mind. And then they have another fixture in 23, and then they blank for 2 game weeks at least. So for me, Chelsea are an avoid, But if you do have players like Alonso, Mason Mount or Rudiger, I'd probably keep ahead of this double. They are facing Man City away, and then it's either Arsenal at home or Brighton away. Now, Arsenal isn't actually that bad of a fixture, but at the same time, they have improved a lot this season, and Arsenal could cause problems for Chelsea. It's a London derby, it's a fierce rivalry, and they are much better than the last time these two teams faced off. Brighton would be a decent fixture, especially from a defensive point of view, but honestly, I wouldn't be bringing any of these players in. Lukaku was someone I talked about skipping a few weeks ago before his problems with Thomas Tuchel and the interview he gave. He is definitely an avoid now. But yeah, these three players are the only ones I consider. There is also Pulisic as a kind of differential, but honestly, I would steer clear. I would not be bringing in Chelsea players. I have to stress that. Even though they could have an okay double game week and they have some good players, I just wouldn't go for them because those blanks in a few game weeks' time reduce their appeal. The fixtures as well before 24 and 25 are also pretty poor, especially in 23. So honestly, I would just steer clear from Chelsea assets, but these three look like the best ones. We've still got a lot of other teams to actually go through. So most teams, as you can see, have a potential double game week, but in terms of how likely they are, only a set few actually do have that. So just bear that in mind, and so many things can happen. Some of the teams that are likely to have a double game week may end up not having it, and the same goes for those who actually are marked as possibly having it. According to Ben Krillin, they could actually end up being the ones having the double game week. So this could change in a week's time, and we should know more, like I said, around Tuesday next week. But let's just take this with a pinch of salt, have the latest information, and just try to do the best we can with this. But things can change, especially in football, we already know that. But with Crystal Palace, they have Brighton away and Watford away potentially. So the Watford fixture is the one that could be slotted in for game week 22. But as things stand, Brighton away is the only confirmed fixture for the Eagles. And for me, Conor Gallagher is the best option. He should be back from his positive COVID test, which he gave around a week ago. Edouard is looking really good right now. He is very inconsistent, but he is also very explosive, and he's been very good in the last few weeks. So let's see if he can actually keep up that level of consistency, but over a longer period of time rather than just for 2 or 3 game weeks in a row. Then we have Michael Olise. Whenever he plays, he just gets some goals or assists, and I think he could be a really nice option if he can nail down that spot for that Crystal Palace side. Then you're looking at the defenders. I just don't trust Palace's defence, so I wouldn't go anywhere near them. And that also includes Vicente Gaita. So honestly, it's just their midfielders that I'm looking at, especially Conor Gallagher. And if you want a cheap striker, maybe to replace Ivan Toney, for example, Edouard could be the one to go for. Do I prefer Emmanuel Dennis? Yes, I do. The same goes for Watkins, Antonio, Ronaldo or Harry Kane. But Edouard is looking very good, and Olise could be a nice differential who's very cheap, and he could be your 5th midfielder. So I think these 3 are worth considering. Anyone else really? Probably not, to be honest. And with Crystal Palace, I'd only go for 1 player. I wouldn't look to double or triple up, despite some decent fixtures potentially for Game Week 22. Now, a lot of people may disagree with me, but I wouldn't look to triple up on Liverpool, despite the fact that their set of games for Game Week 22 could be absolutely amazing. So they are facing Brentford at home already. Then it's between Leeds at home or Arsenal away. Now that Arsenal away fixture isn't that great, but if they do get Leeds at home in that 22, I mean, that would be absolutely amazing, and the likes of Trent or Jota are really good triple captain options, to be honest. Now there is a simple reason why I'm not advocating for a triple up. Robertson is a good choice and he could do really well in Game Week 22. I'm not denying that. The problem is you're getting rid of Salah and you want to get him back in around Game Weeks 24 or 25 whenever he does return from the African Cup of Nations. And it makes it more difficult when you have a triple up unless you do a like-for-like swap from Jota to Salah. But do you really want to get rid of Jota? Probably not. And then with Robertson, you're probably going to get rid of him, but then you need to get rid of a midfielder to then get Salah back in. And if you don't have enough money, then you need to downgrade one of your premium strikers if you have one, like Harry Kane or Cristiano Ronaldo. So you're looking at a -4 or a -8 potentially, especially if other injuries and COVID cases also play a part in your transfers and decision making. So for me, it's just best to have a double up of Trent and Jota. You can go for a triple up if you're on a free hit. That makes complete sense. And I don't really, I don't think that's a bad idea. Roberto Firmino or Robertson look really good, for example. But otherwise, for your normal team, for me, it's the best case scenario to just have a double up and then look to bring Salah back in Game Weeks 24 or 25, because from that point onwards, you want to have the Egyptian, and if you don't, you might struggle, especially if more and more people get on him and his effective ownership only increases as most people will be captaining him. But those set of fixtures, Brentford and Leeds, if that does happen, that's amazing for Liverpool, and that could be a really good opportunity if you're on a free hit to triple up. But otherwise, just go for the double up and go for Trent and Diego Jota. Here we have Manchester United, and they are facing Aston Villa away, and then it's between Brighton at home or Brentford away. And if I'm being completely honest with Man United, they look really poor at the moment, even worse arguably than when they were under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But yeah, the players are to blame as well for the situation. Cristiano Ronaldo is still a really good option. He can produce those occasional double-digit hauls, so I think he is still a good choice. But I am seeing some people actually think of doing Ronaldo to Kane, or maybe downgrade Ronaldo to get a cheaper striker. Now, the thing I like about Ronaldo is he is a good cash cow to get Salah back in, and also in a double game week with those fixtures he could do extremely well. But Man United are just disjointed. They're going to be very inconsistent. They're going to disappoint more often than not. Bruno Fernandes looked very good when he came on against Wolves, but he is not completely nailed, as demonstrated by the benching from Ralf Rangnick against Wolves in Game Week 21. So he's just nowhere near as appealing of an asset as he was last season. So for me, it's Ronaldo and De Gea that you want to go for. And once again with De Gea, he's only kept, 4 clean sheets this season. So even then, he's not an amazing choice. But he has a high ceiling due to the amount of saves and bonus points he can potentially accumulate. But really, it's just Ronaldo from Man United right now. And the other assets just aren't anywhere near as good. You look at Diego Dallo as well, for example. He was doing pretty decent, but he lost his place to Wan-Bissaka, who started 2 games in a row. Telles should start one of the games in Game Week 22 at least, if United indeed have a double game week, because Luke Shaw accumulated too many yellow cards, and that suspension can only be served in the Premier League rather than in other cup competitions like the FA Cup, which is coming very soon. So for me, it's just Ronaldo. Just a long story short, Cristiano Ronaldo is the only one I'd go for, and even then, if I didn't have Ronaldo, would I be looking to bring him in? Probably not, but if you have him, in most cases, I'd actually look to hold him, because I think he could do pretty well, and if you look to captain him, you could actually do very well from that decision. Let's keep this short and sweet as well. So with Newcastle United, they face Watford at home and either Everton away or Southampton away. That's a good set of fixtures, but Callum Wilson I think is out for a month, so he is no longer an option. He'd be the only one I would consider really. Saint-Maximin is still injured, but if he does return from injury ahead of Game Week 22, he is definitely the pick of the bunch. Then you have Joelinton, who's actually been performing pretty well, but in a different role in the midfield. But with all the injuries to Saint-Maximin and Callum Wilson, Joelinton could potentially reprise his role as the central striker for Newcastle United. Then you have Jacob Murphy here on screen. I wouldn't go for him. So honestly, it's just a case of Saint-Maximin, Callum Wilson, and potentially Joelinton. But I would just avoid all Newcastle players. And it's just a shame that Wilson isn't an option, because he could actually be a really good choice in this double game week. But yeah, Newcastle United, for me, it's a complete avoid, just like with Burnley and Brentford before. Another avoid is Norwich City. Now, we don't know when Norman's going to return, for example. I think he has an injury to his pelvic area. So I'm not sure what the situation is with him, but he was one of the better options in the midfield if you're looking for a 4.5 million option. But then you look at Gilmour, he's probably the best one you can go for right now from Norwich City anyway. And Timo Pukki, he's decent. He didn't play in Game Week 21 because of a late COVID test, I believe. But really, we're looking at everyone else. I wouldn't go for anyone, if I'm being honest. I look at the other Norwich assets. Their defence is absolutely horrible. Don't go near them. And then you look at the rest of the team, it's just Pukki. So unless you're looking for a 4.5 million midfielder, if Norman's available, he's all right. Then also Gilmour. But really, you're just looking at Pukki from Norwich. And once again, it's another case of avoiding Norwich City and just, not going for their assets if you can help it. But in terms of the fixtures Norwich would have, they have Everton already, and then they could have Leicester away to form that double game week. But ultimately, just stay clear from Norwich. Now, Southampton actually are on the brink of a takeover, but who would I consider? Let's just keep it simple. Brozier, Livramento and Ward-Prowse. If you have Livramento, I'd keep him potentially, but if you do find a way to improve him to a Cucurella or Cash, which I may do myself, then I would do it. But I think he is still one of the better options for Southampton. He should recover in time for that Game Week 22 fixture. And also we'll see if he recovers for the second set of games in Game Week 21 when he does face Brentford. But that will be pretty interesting to see what happens there. Ward-Prowse, I think right now is the best option for Southampton. He's been producing quite a lot of returns recently. He's been very consistent. We all know about his set-piece prowess. He's very good with those. And he could be a nice double game week option. But ultimately, apart from Brozier, who is a good budget striker, I just wouldn't really be a big fan of bringing these Southampton players in. But these three are decent. Ward-Prowse and Brozier in particular. Southampton have been very poor defensively for the last 10 game weeks or so, but their attack is fairly decent, and Brozier and Ward-Prowse could be nice differential options for you in Game Week 22. The fixtures for Southampton aren't too bad if they do have a double game week. They have Wolves away already, then they could also have Newcastle at home to form that double game week. So once again, they are worth consideration. If you do have some of these assets already, you could actually keep them, especially Brozier or Ward-Prowse. but would I be looking to bring them in? Probably not, just in my opinion. We're now at the final team that could have a double game week in Wolves. Jose Sarr has arguably been the best goalkeeper this season along with Aaron Ramsdale, so I think he is worth consideration. If you haven't bought a second goalkeeper already, buy Jose Sarr in my opinion. Wolves have some good fixtures. They've got an amazing clean sheet record recently. I think they've got 6 clean sheets in the last 8 games, I believe, something like that. I might be wrong. And I think they've only conceded 2 goals in that time, and they faced the likes of Liverpool and City. They were very unlucky to lose those games. They should have come away with something. So Jose Sarr is a really good option. I think Cody would be my pick of the bunch in the defence. But what I do like about Aït-Nouri actually is he's coming back from injury. He could slot in as the left wing back, and Marçal replaces Saiss, who is going to the African Cup of Nations, as the left centre back. So Aït-Nouri was doing really well before his injury. He was getting bonus points, the occasional assist, and the clean sheets. I think he could be the pick of the bunch around 4.2, 4.3 million, and Marçal could also play in the same team. And Marçal isn't really known for his attacking prowess. He's not really a great option on the left wing back spot, and Aït-Nouri is much better. So I think he could actually come back in, and Wolves make that little tactical tweak and make those changes in the lineup to replace Romain Saiss, who is arguably one of their better defenders and players, and Wolves will be good to go. Now there is still Raul Jimenez, you could consider him. Podence looked very sharp against Manchester United, but I'm ultimately looking at the defence. Would I double up? Probably not, but it's not a bad idea actually with those fixtures, and Wolves have been very good even during the tougher games. But for me, I would just go for one, and I'd go for either Jose Sarr in goal or Conor Cody or Aït-Nouri. Semedo's still decent, same with Kilman, and all the other options in Wolves such as Marçal, who's also very cheap. But Aït-Nouri, Cody and Sarr for me are the 3 best you can go for. And the fixtures for Wolves would be Southampton away, and it would either be Watford at home or Arsenal away. And if it ends up being Watford at home, that's a really good set of double game week fixtures for Wolves. If it's Arsenal, then it becomes a bit more difficult. But still, Wolves assets, definitely keep an eye on them, especially their defenders and their very good goalkeeper. So we finished off with the teams that are likely to have a double game week and the ones that could have one. Now we're on to the 2 teams that are not going to be having a double in game week 22. And Manchester City will only be facing Chelsea at home. And for me, still the best options are Aymeric Laporte, João Cancelo, who is definitely the standout by far, and Phil Foden. Now there is Kevin De Bruyne or Raheem Sterling if you're looking for a like-for-like Mohamed Salah replacement. But ultimately, if you don't have Son, I would rather go for him over those premium assets from Manchester City. But Cancelo is definitely the standout. He's not in discussion. You should have him. And if you don't have João Cancelo already, maybe wait until Game Week 23 to get him in, because you want to be doubling up or going for these teams with a double game week and taking advantage of that. João Cancelo is only facing Chelsea at home, which might not even be a clean sheet anyway for the citizens, despite how good they are defensively. Phil Foden, he's been very unlucky, same with his owners, in terms of constantly being in and out of the team. Now, the disciplinary issues, that is Phil Foden's fault, so that's not really him being unlucky. But in terms of him getting COVID after a really good performance against Brentford, now that is quite, on the bad stroke of luck. But still, for me, he's one of the best options for City, and he possibly offers the best value in their midfield from, all their options, and they have plenty, to be honest. And Bernardo Silva, if he plays once again in that attacking role like he did against Arsenal, he's always an enticing option. But these 3 look like the best. Then there's also Diaz if you want to double up on City defence. But would I be looking to bring in another City player right now? Probably not, because they only have 1 game in 22. So look at those teams that I covered in the likely to have a double game week section, or those that could have a double game week, and then look to bring in more City players from game week 23 onwards, where their fixtures are still really good. The final team to be covered in this video is West Ham. We've gone for every single team, and West Ham only face Leeds at home. That's a pretty decent fixture, and if you're looking to bench boost, if you have Jeroboam or Antonio, that's still worthwhile in terms of bench boosting with those 2 players there on your bench and seeing what they can do against Leeds United. That's a very good fixture. Now, if you have someone like Ben Johnson or Soufal or Dawson, I would actually be tempted to even take another -4, get rid of them for a double game week player, especially those from good teams like Wolves or Aston Villa or Brighton, defensively at least better than West Ham, and you could actually make that switch and take advantage of that double. But Bowen and Antonio, I'd actually look to keep. Would I be bringing in any West Ham players right now? No. Once again, like with City, get their players in from game week 23 onwards if you are interested in one of them. But with Bowen and Antonio, you could actually keep them instead of selling them, which I've seen some people talk about doing ahead of game week 22. Once again, None of the doubles that I talked about are officially confirmed, but it's pretty much almost certain that West Ham and City will not have a double game week, so you don't want to be bringing in their players right now. So wait until we have the information next week. You should have a few days to plan and prepare for any kind of eventuality, and seeing what the fixtures actually are before the deadline. Then you can make the best decisions possible and stack your team with as many double game week players as you can, and you can maybe even bench boost because of that. But once again, I keep mentioning the bench boost. It might be counterproductive, because if COVID is still rampant in a few weeks' time, which it still could be, to be honest, right now it's looking likely, maybe it's going to be a waste of time to actually play the bench boost when certain games are called off, and some teams who were supposed to have a double may end up having no games at all, or just the one, and it just renders your bench boost nowhere near as effective as it would have been without the postponement. So let's wait and see. A lot can still change, but that is the double game week guide. We've gone for every single team. I'm now going to show you a graphic provided by Ben Crellin of the teams that are likely to have a double game week, the ones that could have one, and those two teams, West Ham and Man City, who are not going to be doubling in game week 22. So if we look at the column where there's a lot of orange cells, that's the one you want to be looking at. So as you can see, those in orange are likely to have a double game week. So once again, just to make this clear, Everton, Burnley, Tottenham, Watford, Brighton, Arsenal, Leicester, and Leeds are all likely to have a double game week. So those teams you want to really be looking at, but once again, do not make early transfers. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Now, those that are highlighted in a kind of peachy colour, so we're looking at Brentford, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Aston Villa, Wolves, Newcastle, Norwich, Crystal Palace and Southampton. All of those could have a double game week, but it's less likely than those highlighted in orange. And then those two that are highlighted in kind of grey or black, we're looking at West Ham and Manchester City. Those two teams only have one fixture. So remember, West Ham will face Leeds at home and that's it. And then you look at Manchester City, they face Chelsea at home and that's it. But they are still good assets. You can still keep Cancelo, Jarrod Bowen and Antonio and bench boost with them. That's what I'm looking to do potentially, and taking a -8 in order to achieve that. But that is the overview of all of this in terms of who is likely to blank, who could have one, and those two teams that are not going to be doubling up. So just bear all of that in mind. Let me know what you think of all of this down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you very much for all the support. We've reached 9,000 subscribers on New Year's Day, so a great way to start off 2022. And all the very best of luck with Game Week 22 and the rest of Game Week 21, which is still going on, but we have to wait around a week or so for the conclusion of that game week to happen. And let's see what happens in the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. And once again, do not make early transfers, because there's so much going on within the next 2 weeks. It just doesn't make any sense to be kind of chasing these price rises or falls in order to get the best squad value possible. Just wait. Trust me, you'll be the better for it, because ultimately you could actually shoot yourself in the foot if you do indeed make early transfers. But thank you very much for watching. All the very best of luck. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well, Dylan_RCM, and also join the Discord server and the league. All of that is in the description below, and I'll see you next time.